In a short stretch of time from the mid-90s to the early 2000s, a relatively small group of people started playing around with this thing called the World Wide Web. They had the audacity to think they just might change the world. This project introduces you to the OG players from those hallowed days and lets them tell you what it was like and how you should have been there. Episode 31. We're talking to Dan Sellers today. He's a UX guru. He's been doing UX since before they called it UX. I think they just called it like, go make a website. Ritesh.
Hey, brother. What's going on? How is Colorado?
God, it's sunny and nice today, but it's been ripping hot out here.
It's crazy.
Global warming thing is bullshit.
Watch, we'll get snow in August here in New Jersey. Right? It's gonna be crazy, right? So,
exactly.
Look at this. We've made it to 31. We're over 30 now.
I know.
We're heading towards middle age. Look at this.
I have consistently gotten, podcast efforts up to episode 9. So the fact that we're north of 30 is like a little miracle.
It's scary. It's scary.
So anyway, if you like what we do, go to youshoulda.com. You can see past episodes. You can see all sorts of stuff. You can get to audio podcast versions of it. You can leave comments here. And I'm getting a little bit of echo all of a sudden.
Uh-oh.
No, I'm not.
Let me. Is that me? Is that you?
I don't know. Something. Okay. Whatever you did, just fix something.
Okay. Good.
You can leave comments if you know Dan and you're here. Heckle him. It's important. And of course, subscribe. Go to the YouTube channel. We need the clicks. We want to be influencers. Old as we are, I look like a carpet salesman from the 70s.
Knock on people's door. Can I sell you an encyclopedia? We have a whole set,
Dan Sellers!
Yay! Look at that.
Dude. Nice to see you guys.
It is great to see you.
So here's another one who doesn't age. What the heck's going on here?
He looks exactly the same.
Exactly. Hasn't changed a bit.
If I'd have shaved this morning, you would have just been like, whoa, that guy still looks 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're supposed to keep it.
You look like a triathlete. You've been doing well with yourself.
I'm up to 60 miles a week cycling. I think that's pretty modest. 60 miles a week is 230s or a series of 8 mile in the basement. So or that's what I'm sort of running off at this point.
I do about 60 a week. That's steps around the house. I try to get up to 60. Whether I do it or not.
I've literally hit 20 now. So it'll take me some time, Dan, to get. But, we had Porres on not too long ago who's doing a bloody triathlon this week. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, sir, it's great to see you, man.
Thank you. No, thank you for having me at such short notice. And, the serendipity of an email string from you gentlemen because of a deck around EPAM and agency.com and then an invitation to come on this Friday. And it turned out that I was on vacation this week. So I was like, we should do this.
Oh, it's so awesome.
We should find the brevity to talk about some of those things that were just the nuggets, the little moments of delight that I think are still relevant today as they were back then. But I will speak very much about things that are happening in my world, and hopefully some of it is of interest.
Well, the EPAM thing was really interesting for me because I remember meeting some of the EPAM people a couple of years ago at a conference when we did those things, in person.
Yeah.
And one of them was copied on that email that I sent because they were like, do you know anything about us? I said, you have no idea. We were working with you back in 1999, So that's when I found this deck. I finally, because I was on a mission last week, clean stuff out, get hard drives all set up and everything. And I found this deck. I was like, I've got to send it just to prove that I wasn't making it up.
That's so funny. So for all the people that don't know EPAM in 1999 was probably close to 400 people out of Eastern Europe.
Yeah,
with
Russia.
A strong math and science and engineering capabilities, almost like a thoroughbred of that sort of math science education out of Eastern Europe. And they had started to do work for people like SAP and Oracle, core engineering inside of these big, massive organizations. And Arkady and a few others moved to Princeton, New Jersey to set up EPAM USA and to begin to understand, how to build a thoroughbred company of engineers. And I was
we met them.
So that is the genesis, if you like, of EPAM Systems, who are now publicly traded, and we're close to 47,000 employees.
Wow. Whoa, you're kidding me, really?
So earnings came out yesterday, and we're doing about $2 to $2.5 billion a year business. And I joined them when I think we were 8,000 or 9,000 strong.
Wow.
So how long have you been there, Dan? How long have you been
there? To sort of set it in context and sort of place it all together, I've been with them now for maybe 6.5 years.
Okay.
And I was working for a company called Great Fridays out of New York. We were a service design firm doing, I think, some well-crafted service design thinking as a consultancy for Sonos and Microsoft and MasterCard out of the US, and some work for Adobe and some others. And as we were acquired, we were joining Empathy Labs out of Philly.
Empathy Labs, that's right.
And so Kevin Labig and the team out of Empathy Labs, Jonathan Lupo.
Jonathan Lupo was there, that's right.
Yeah, and so Jonathan Lupo actually should be on your show, because Jonathan Lupo also is an ACOM employee.
Do you remember Jonathan Kyle? He was in New York, remember?
So
maybe we'll get him and April Spicer together. Those were the sort of, remember April? She was doing some crazy UX stuff as well, right, Dan?
Yep,
sorry,
right.
I interrupted you. So Jonathan Lupo.
It's absolutely fine. And so that's sort of the story. And largely acquisitions of small firms, you kind of have to let go of what you were to become something new.
Yep.
And what I mean by that is, if my identity was based on what we were before, I'm going to struggle, because that identity is now part of something much bigger.
Right.
But ultimately, what I wouldn't want us to do is feel diluted. I would want us to feel that our DNA is now stronger, because we're working with thoroughbred engineers who are actually going to help us go build, make, and deploy things into the real world.
Oh, that's really cool.
So I'll just say that before I went to Great Fridays, I had spent 2.5 years on staff at Thomson Reuters, because I wanted to learn product and I wanted to be thrown into investment banking. And I was inside of the Icon team. I was inside of investment banking for 2.5 years, really taking UX and building and deploying. So, I understood what it was like to go build and deploy. And EPAM was one of the engineering partners of Thomson Reuters. And so when we were acquired, I was like, I know EPAM really well. There's some of these guys on my team. So again, if there's a theme of serendipity, it's like you've met somebody before and you had a really great experience, and then you meet them again and you're like, this will be great.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, let's dial back the Wayback Machine. And talk about sort of in the early days, how did you discover the internet? How did you, what were you doing? How did you discover it? Did you have aha moments? And then sort of how did you get involved with, everything you got involved with in those early formative internet years?
Yeah. So, I'm sort of going to talk a little bit about sort of my beginnings, because I started off in the north of England in a national park. It's called the Lake District. It's very beautiful. The only thing I could sort of really do there was kind of photography, and that got me to art college. And so photography got me to art college. But, to get to art college, you've got to kind of fund yourself. And so I was working in a camera shop at the weekends in order to have money to go to college. And I actually went from doing sort of 35mm photography all the way up to 5x4 and 10x8 sort of plate camera.
Wow.
So what I sort of recognized was I have this appetite to sort of move into something that feels intuitive, like, oh, I can do photography. I understand lenses and exposure. Mm-hmm. And then you learn about composition. And then you learn about all these things like, what do you like when you're doing portraiture versus landscape? And you sort of start to take on those learnings. And I think the big message or the big learning for me was I can just keep figuring stuff out, and I'll sort of fall, and maybe some things are quite interesting and will work, and I'll carry that into the next thing. So I went to art school, and I was pretty good at photography at that point. And then I actually was photographing a triathlon in the Lake District of a friend of mine. And I was hanging out of my buddy's car taking pictures.
Yeah.
And I printed all these pictures out because it was analog days, right?
Yeah,
I printed them all out and I laid them on a floor, and I was like, wow, this is like a film sequence. So then it just sort of struck me that I should be filming. I should be figuring out not just doing photography, but actually filming, because it was like single frames.
Yeah.
So I went back and started filming triathlons with just, 8mm cameras and cine cameras, and was getting stuff. And that got me into Edinburgh College of Art to do film. So that's where I got my film basis. So I did film for 3 years.
Got it.
And again, the theme of this is no one's funding me to go to college or university. So I've got to keep finding ways to get work at the weekends and on the side. So I end up working
You've been an entrepreneur from the beginning.
I've been a struggling entrepreneur from the beginning. There is no trust fund. There's no blank checks. I've got to find a way to do what I do and love, but I've got to do something at the weekends and evenings to keep funding it.
Yeah.
So I ended up working as a runner in a post-production company. I wanted to work at the BBC. That was always my kind of mission. Dan, get yourself to the BBC, figure out a way to get in. It's the best. They are making some of the most interesting and compelling content for the diversity of the UK. Try and find a way in. And I sent off my letters, and I always got rejected. Mm-hmm. And so what I did is, and I thought about this, I thought, well, who does the BBC use in Edinburgh for their post-production when their facilities full? And I looked up all the firms in Edinburgh who did post-production, commercials, houses, and so forth, found the BBC's name on some of them, then became a runner in those places.
Oh, that's so cool.
And then when I applied in my final year as a runner for the BBC, I talked all about the work I was doing, for these firms in New York, and I got hired as a runner for Edinburgh Nights, which was one of their big arts programs.
Oh,
so now,
cool.
So I'm doing final year of Edinburgh. I'm shooting a short film with one of the former Doctor Who's, John Pertwee. I've got the BBC to fund my short film, which we're shooting on film. And plus I've got this summer gig. And so I graduate with film, and I've made a film and I'm shooting, and I want to sort of become a commercials director, but it's 1995 and there is the beginnings of the internet. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to go and do a master's at the Royal College of Art to do film design, but they only take people every 2 years. So I have this gap year. Oh. And I go and take a job with British Telecom Research Labs in the UK, where the BBC has partnered with British Telecom to figure out the future of TV and telecommunications.
Wow.
So you probably have never heard that story, but I went and did a year with Martlesham Heath with this research facility, and I'm working kind of part
with the geeks,
with the BBC and with BT, and I'm sort of being an interaction designer. I'm sort of designing motion sequences and the interaction of users. So
when was this, Dan? When was this?
This was in 90, and so I graduated 94, so this was 95.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they were starting, that's leading edge. I mean, I remember
leading edge,
BT, and wow.
Yeah. And they had a pretty sizable budget. I think there were probably maybe 1,000 researchers thinking about the future of technology, of telecommunications at the core of the network. They were already predicting the move to an IP network.
Wow.
Peter Cochran was the head of labs at that point. So I did this year with them. I started to figure out.
That must have been amazing, though, for you to go from photography, camera shop, the Lake District, to this core of engineering and boffins who are sitting there thinking about all the things you could do with telecoms, right?
And you know what sort of happened is I realized when I opened my mouth, I was dangerous. It would show actually my naivety. And so I actually started to think, don't speak. Don't speak.
Yeah.
Just show some of your designs. Let your drawing and your design thinking be kind of the vehicle of how you speak. Try to have a diagram or two, or position a scenario before you start talking and get dangerous with technology. Think about what the user's going through. Think about the empathy for what you're trying to kind of bring to the table with 20 engineers who are thinking, how are we going to build this and so forth.
Is that just kind of who you are? Like what was it a Steiner thing? Like what?
The photography thing, I would say, right?
Yeah.
You're looking at photography and the images and whatever. That must have sort of trained your mind a bit, I'm sure.
It
right?
did. So, so I was always chasing the BBC, and I was chasing the BBC because I was always chasing Ridley Scott. And I was always chasing Ridley Scott because of Alien in 1979, scared the pants out of me. And I was like, somebody made this. This happened, right? This was a documentary about
who came up with this, right?
Called the Nostromo, and they lost them. And so I was like, you mean you can build like film? And so that's what led me to the BBC. What led me to the RCA, because Ridley and Tony had both been to the RCA. And so I was really like, I was always like, draw storyboards, get good at drawing, and tell what you're trying to say, because your words are never always going to come out very well. Or I'm very critical of how I speak, but let your drawing speak for you. So do 70% drawing, and then the last 30% you can explain what you're talking about.
Yeah, I was always the opposite, because I couldn't do the drawing thing. So I'm like, talk 99%, and then let someone else do the other one.
But that's where interdisciplinary teams come in, right? Because if I'm on your team, I'm drawing, you're speaking, and then the little bit that I speak, where I can get a word in edgeways, I'll say, actually, what Carl was talking about is it translates like this to this. These transition points, these markers from the start, the middle to the end are really important. And here's the elocution of the elements. Right? What I started to figure out was, don't think in big, massive, weighty sentences. Think a few smart, thoughtful words that connect this going to that.
What amazing training. What amazing training.
So I do the RCA. I get into the RCA to do film design, but I've got a year in my backpack
with BBC and
Labs.
BT.
I get onto the film course, and they're like, okay, so we're going to be using Silicon Graphics to do virtual sets. And I'm like, this doesn't feel right. Something doesn't feel right about me doing this after the last year I've had. I'm going to go up to the industrial design school and talk to them. So I went upstairs, because the film department's on the ground floor, or it certainly was back then. And I went up to the industrial design school, of which Dyson is part of that group of people. So it's a thoroughbred of product design.
Wow.
I talked to them and I said, here's what's really interesting. Here's what's really challenging. And I want to pitch you an idea. And I said to them, I'm a film designer. I think about narrative, stories, scenarios, and users. I'm really interested in the space that's opening up with sort of emerging media technology about what our future of television is, what our future of movies is, interactive cinema, maybe. They said, well, we teach product design, industrial design, and UX design. Now, Tim Brown, who is now chairman of IDEO, was part of this group, this class. It was called Computer-Related Design. It was one of the first interaction design courses in the world. Most of the 100% of the students were being hired straight off the course, and they were either going to Microsoft, Apple, Taligent, a number of key Silicon Valley companies who are hiring them as sort of senior UXers. This is before UX is a thing. It's
Apple really was doing that.
So human factors, engineering,
and was this UX for things like CD-ROMs and things like that?
Products. So it was products, right?
It was product. It was embedded systems inside of Motorola. What led Tim Brown into this sort of thinking was Motorola was one of their clients from the industrial design side of the house.
Got it.
And was asking them to build the menu of those clunky cell phones that we were all using.
Right.
That's how they started working with Motorola, with Nokia. And then they actually started to say, we're reimagining things. We're going to reimagine this experience. And it's not just about industrial, but it's about the ecosystem around it.
Right. Wow.
Remember Palm?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think HD still uses the Palm. Me too.
Like some affinity to the way it looked. It felt like a little personality.
Yeah.
But you know what, Dan? I think the Scion guys all came out of that as well. If you remember the Scion, which was that flip with the keyboard and stuff, with the design of that product was amazing. And I think one or two of those product guys came out of the same area that you were in at the time when they launched the Scion.
So one of the things I was doing when I was doing film, I was a film designer and I was building sets. So going into industrial design and product didn't feel like a stretch, because I would, without any hesitation, would build you a set, either in a warehouse or I'd go into a location and we would set dress it. And I was always really comfortable at being able to draw things and make things and manufacture things. So product didn't scare me from that side of it. And so I'll tell you a little bit about the Royal College just for 30 seconds. Great school. If you've got like abilities and you want to go to the highest level of like design and craft, you know, think about this as a master's course because it's going to put you into a very different space.
Yeah.
Intellectually, you're going to be challenged to the very root of your existence. It was the hardest 2 years of my entire career. Wow. I don't think it was any harder than it possibly could have been there. And I learned so much from my fellow students who've all gone on and done incredible things around the world.
Wow.
But the thing, like, I guess the point I was trying to make was that on a course like that, you're pushed to the very limit. So when you push to the very limit, I do feel like you look inside of yourself about, well, what worked in the past when I was pushed to my limit? Mm-hmm. And so for me, when I was given a project or like, because they set briefs and so forth, I was always like, let's try and shoot a film to explain our idea the way it sort of progresses. Because remember, I can't stand in front of an audience and sort of wave my arms around and make that communication be felt. I
think you're better than you give yourself.
Yeah, I feel the same thing.
Back then, I was like, do not rely on walking in there with just with a couple of diagrams. It's not going to fly, and they'll shoot you down. So I was getting actors to kind of prototype visions of the experiences I want to build, and we were shooting things and dumbing things up a little bit like how Ridley Scott made Blade Runner on the back lot, and he was pulling other sets from other films, and he was shooting certain things. I was kind of like, this is like guerrilla Blade Runner, right? Literally, so we had this was a really great project. Philips came in. Literally, like some of the heads of Philips came in and said, we want the future
the big conglomerates in Amsterdam.
That's right. And there were ex-students who were on Philips. And I'm going to bring my level down a second. I'm just...
No, it's all good. Keep going. I love it. Keep going. Keep going. It's awesome.
So they're saying, what is the future of television? It's 1997, 98. We think projectors in the home are really a way to kind of reconnect to our childhood, where we used to watch kind of movies, Super 8, projection. Think about sound in the interface, controlling, when you're turning up your volume and you're changing channel. Think about maybe gesture. So I did a kind of Terry Gilliam, Ridley Scott-esque scene in a guy in a bath with a projection on the wall. He's watching an old movie on the wall, and it's projection. And he uses his hand with gesture to control the volume up and down.
Wow.
It's actually the third man is playing it. So it's a beautiful
film, really? Right? I love it.
That's one of my
favorite films of all time.
I love that film. Right? Yeah.
And we shot this, I kid you not, in a week, because we had to present on the Monday. We have all week figuring out what actors I can find, how am I going to do it? And we imitated the interface we were using like very early version of After Effects, and we just built like the interface changing, and then we synced our actor to the thing that's playing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I love it.
He controls it, and then we dubbed audio on top of it.
Right.
Then we presented this to Philips, and they were like, just like, okay, there's an internship. There's 2 spots for internship. Please come to Philips. Please help us.
Exactly.
This is really fun. And it was one of my moments where
I love it.
You pull from the very bottom of your skills. You don't know whether it's going to work. And I was doing it with one other person. So we were pairing up, and then we presented. And I knew that when I was going to do this presentation, I would have the tape. I'd have the tape. I could press play, and it would deliver the thing that I was trying to do. And it surely did.
And that's amazing. But that's the thing, right? Imagination, curiosity, we can make it, figure it out. Let's go pull something, and, we'll dub something and put the guy in a bathtub. I mean, that's what it was all about, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's been a theme of these shows is there's the thing everyone seemed to have in common, because it wasn't training, everyone came from everywhere.
Yeah.
But the thing everyone had in common was sort of curiosity and drive, and that willingness to say, I can, invent.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah. So how did you get to the internet agency.com, that sort of transition?
So after I graduated, I went to Switzerland. I was kind of burnt out, I think, from sort of, I did a little bit. So actually there is a gap. I actually went and designed, and this will take you to 1999. So you guys are doing BritishAirways.com in the UK. I'm looking at the British Airways website and going like, oh my God, it's gorgeous.
Those early designs were really fun.
And so I was in London. I had graduated. I went off to Switzerland for a year and worked for a startup called Fantastic.com. And they went and did a big IPO and launched. And then I came back to London. And I was freelancing for a firm who was doing big commercial websites, like ACMilan.com's first big commercial website. I designed ACMilan.com. I did BayernMunich.com. I was working with Formula One, and I was actually reimagining the Formula One experience on the desktop.
Wow.
Amazing.
So cool.
Here's why this is significant. Something's happened. I'm now living 10 years ahead of where the technology and where the commercial business is.
Yeah, at least.
The .com stuff for the sports websites is bringing me back to reality. I'm having to deploy ACMilan.com. We are getting monstrous amounts of hits. They've never had a commercial website before, and I'm having to lead that with off the King's Road. We're a startup and we're going and doing that. It's some ex-Sky broadcast people who've bought the rights. They've effectively bought the rights for all of these big sports clubs, right? I'm doing that, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm designing commercial websites, but I'm also doing Formula One. And my wife is working for Diesel. She's my girlfriend at the time. She's in Italy working for Diesel.
Wow.
Diesel, remember, is doing all of these campaigns that are just like blowing everyone's mind.
Yeah.
But there was these gorillas, and like they were holding hands with children.
Yeah.
And I was like, who is Diesel? So it's a bunch of Brits and Danish people and Dutch people out in Italy, rural Italy. My wife's a textile designer, print designer, went to Central St. Martin's. She's out there. She then gets a job in New York for Calvin Klein.
Wow.
I'm in London, she's in New York, and we're pretty serious, and we've been dating. We met at Edinburgh College of Art, and I want to get to New York. And I don't quite know how. Because you don't just walk into New York and say, I've arrived.
You can.
Yeah.
And so I sort of think to myself, well, maybe there is a US firm that's doing some business in London. I don't know, maybe. And I've just done like a year's worth of interactive TV with this Danish firm out in Switzerland. So I've got interactive TV under my belt. I've done some commercial websites for AC Milan and stuff. So I've got a book. Yeah. And I managed to find Online Magic in London, who've been doing this British Airways work, and I thought was beautiful, and I really admired the brand. Yeah. And so I went in to talk to them, and they said, well, actually, we've got an interactive TV team. So you could actually come and do some stuff for British Airways like tomorrow if you wanted to.
Wow.
That'd be awesome. Like, could I do that? And the moment I arrived, everyone was kind of leaving to the next gig. And so I was sort of left with half a department or a tenth of a department. But I was like, but that's okay. I mean, we can keep this thing going.
We can figure this thing out. Yeah.
That's how I started working for a little bit of Online Magic and agency.com, because you had acquired Online Magic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just it either, I think it just happened, or it was just about to happen again, that transition point.
Yeah, it was that acquisition, and then it was the
what was the company? Yeah, was it Visionic? What was the company? Visionic.
We bought those guys. Online Magic. So I started going over to Denmark with Visionic, right? And I was pretty comfortable with playout systems. I was pretty comfortable with everything that they were doing at a core engineering perspective. There were these VPs and SVPs of technology, and they'd show network diagrams, and I actually wasn't afraid of what they were showing. I actually figured out that there was core parts of this, the playout systems and the way that it worked, and I was really comfortable, I think, bridging between those worlds and making sure that what we were about to go and deploy was deployable, but it was also really good design thinking, and it had a really good sort of leaned in approach to the way that this had a sort of a broadcast sensibility. What I didn't like about early broadcast systems was they felt really awful to look at. I was like, like it
remember
feels really
teletext?
like, what
Remember teletext?
like TV, like, you know, like, because I had been around BBC graphics and I understood, you know, doing good looking graphics and doing playout systems are almost two different worlds, but the aesthetic and the appreciation of aesthetic can start to carry over.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You remember teletext when that came out?
Yeah.
Everybody was like, wow, this is amazing.
CFAX. People would buy their cheap flights over CFAX.
That's right. On teletext.
So here's what's really interesting. Although the technology has, you know, gone ridiculous, human behaviors and having empathy for human behaviors is still present.
Still present. Well, exactly right.
I mean, you know, my friend's mum bought her cheap flight to Spain off CFAX because it was easy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Page 155. I go on, I see a phone number. I ring a call center in like Durham. And I speak to someone in Durham and I say I want a flight to thingy. And you know, like my like one of the things I've learned is I'm really interested in people and the way they behave to things. What their first reaction is to something, what their reactions are when I sort of reveal more of it, when I do A/B testing and I'm sort of looking at variances between things. I'm really interested in what was the psychology behind why that was more effective than others. I get some broad rules of thumb that I sort of bring to the table, like, oh, here's what we're learning. You know, I've worked in finance and life sciences, and I have, you know, sort of different domains, but I bring always to the table this sort of,
it's that common thread of human behavior, right?
Yeah. How do we understand what's happening here? What's our baseline? How do we understand if I'm going to go try and fix something, don't make something worse. So try to figure out what's actually working. Yeah. Sometimes there's only a few things that are badly wrong, but largely there can be aspects of things which are still satisfactory to a great many people.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. So let's go back to
who are looking at cost benefit of one of our teams coming and helping them. They're trying to look at what the payback period is before this investment is paid back into, you know, and by borrowing from CapEx or OpEx.
Yeah.
If I'm smart enough to be able to understand a little bit of that language and a little bit of where they're coming from, I can help bridge conversations into here's how we think it might work. So
let's go back to, you're now at Online Magic. You've inherited a department that's basically blown up because everybody's doing big things. You go to Denmark. That's where you met Tim, I think, right?
That's where I met Tim Larkham in Denmark.
Okay.
Tim Larkham is a Brit who lives in Denmark.
Yeah.
Who has a similar design background, industrial. Tim's leading for, like, he's one of your, you know, strong lieutenants now is charged with Visionic of bringing this integration into the mothership and actually helping to perhaps bring it to the US and to bring some of that capability.
Well, and to connect the dots, right?
Yes, absolutely.
From this interactive web world to this,
Yeah. And so I get on very well with Tim. I get on very well with the team in Copenhagen, and we are doing things for now GameStop in the UK.
Oh, right.
And, you know, some of the pitches that I'm doing for GameStop is like, you know, rather than me show the interface and all the screens that we're going to be delivering, I actually start with something different. I show like a little bit of like almost like the ad campaign proposition to your customers about what this inspires. As my opening before I go into, you know, and here's what the design looks like. Because I'm trying to begin with, let us imagine what this is going to be felt like in 6 months' time when you start pitching this to your devoted, you know, .com users, and you're transitioning them over to TV or to some other new plays. And I sort of use some of that as a way of saying, we're storytellers. We've got to find a way to create empathy. We've got to find a way to make the first 30 seconds of this presentation
just connect.
Connect with who we're pitching to in a way that makes us go, oh, that's really interesting, carry on.
That's brilliant. And talk about what were the projects, what were the projects? Like, it sounds like the GameStop one was one that was impactful, but like, what do you remember most where you felt like, you know, you were either pushing new ground or it had an impact on you as much as anything?
So remember how I had this great passion for the BBC, and actually, kudos for like the British Airways of the world. There was a TV brand in the US that I really admired greatly, which was Discovery Channel.
Sure. Yep.
And so I've now come over to New York because I was working for you out of London, and with Chris Needham, I offered Chris I will take a full-time job if you hire me full-time. And I can come and do some interactive TV for you out of New York and maybe a little bit in London. I'll bridge some of those sort of transitions. And he said, okay.
But I want to see my girl. You had to
that was it. I want to be with my girlfriend. Job. Yeah.
So, Audrey's doing great. I'm now going to go and enter into the US, work for you guys full time. It's 1999. You couldn't put any more oxygen into the inflated.com. Literally, like not an ounce more of helium.
No, it was insanity.
Right. And I interviewed with Chris when you were on Broadway, but you moved, and you are now, on 20 Exchange Place down in Wall Street.
Yep.
And I'm with Tim, and I'm coming over, and there is an opportunity to work with the AFI, the American Film Institute.
Yep.
Around the future of television media.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
We were partnering with TV brands as part of their sort of extended kind of workshop connection. And I got to go over to LA, and we, with Aaron's help, we literally picked Discovery Channel and Extreme Rides, which was their roller coaster.
Oh, right.
Their premier roller coaster.
That roller coaster. Oh.
That was an amazing concept. I remember that.
Right. So this is my first project delivering a piece of work for you guys in New York with Aaron's help. And I have to say, like, total props to the way in which
Aaron Sugarman.
Aaron was able to be the front man for the story, for the vision, as I was delivering, building, making sure all of the elements as you transition through this great experience just made sense.
Well, that roller coaster thing was amazing. I remember seeing it first time. I was like, whoa.
And to explain it, it'll seem childish now, but it was you could ride the rides and you could choose where
you were going to sit.
So
when we went to theme parks and we watched people, we saw people when they get on rides, some would rush to the front, some would go to the back, some would hug their friend in the middle. They didn't care where they sat, just as long as they weren't at the front or the back.
Yeah.
And so we thought, well, maybe we could film roller coasters from different points of view so that you could, as you pick all these different rides you want to ride on, you can pick where you want to sit. And
it was. I remember first time you showed it to me as the prototype. It was in that little room with you and Tessia and a couple of others, used to hang out.
Yeah.
And I literally walked out. And I think it was Chris Stetson or somebody. I said, dude, you got to go check this thing out. These guys are doing some wacky stuff in here. It's amazing. And
so, again, props to Brian Johnson out of Portland, Oregon. He has also partnered up with me on this pursuit with Discovery Channel, with the AFI. We were up against some of the other bigger agencies of the time. So we were up on stage presenting our piece. And Chris Kilmer, who was running the ITV team at Razorfish, was up on stage with his thing. Largely it was just a great moment of really understanding that in this room, there is literally all of the major players of this emerging space.
Right.
It's all pre-Netflix. TiVo is just around at this time, but it's literally all of the major players, and they're coming together and they're fostering the notion of how do we build this, deploy this, and to some degree commercialize some of these things with new business models and new ideas. I couldn't have been happier. I could not have been happier. I was pulling like 90-hour weeks because I was just so excited to see. And actually, when we presented the work, and this I think is important as well. And I sort of had gotten dinged a few times in the past, and I started to learn not to get dinged as much by clients. When we presented this vision of the future, I said to everybody in the audience, the first prototype I'm going to show you is deployable in 6 months' time. And I showed something that could sit on top of the existing framework of kind of TiVo and some others with a few little
set-top box stuff, right? Yeah.
And then I said, okay, now imagine maybe 18 months from now. Right. And I showed the next prototype, which sort of took the first prototype and added quite a more significant amount of proposition stuff, which was very attractive.
Yeah.
And then the final one where you choose your ride and you choose your position was the final kind of, and there was a render where you could build your own roller coaster from sort of 3D pieces and have them rendered, and Intel would render up these things, you know, in like 30 minutes, and you'd get your own little quick time of your build your own roller coaster. But the way we played it allowed the audience to come along with us.
Yeah, on the journey. Yeah.
And I think that was perhaps, you know, I'd been dinged so many times from showing things that couldn't be built that some of the audience would, you know, sort of just say, yeah, but that's just crazy. You can't build it. And I learned to bring people along. And I learned to bring, I think, some of the audience in the house that is of a technology and of a business mind that says, okay, that's great. How would we commercialize that? That's great. How would we build it?
Yeah. And what was the purpose of that presentation? Was it to win work, or was it just to present these ideas? And then what was the result of you presenting it?
Largely, we were donating our time as Agency I. So I apologize that we were donating our time, but I feel like we were positioning our practice and the domain, this specialism that kind of really didn't exist before, which was emerging media. Things like television and the enhancements of television, not just from a set-top box, but actually the experience itself, is an area that we are just at the early foundations.
Yeah.
There's work to be done, Comcast. There's work to be done, Discovery Channel. And actually, we ended up with the senior executives of Discovery not only being in the room, but then being part of subsequent conversations about what do we do with our tentpole events every summer, like Shark Week? What does Shark Week look like, you know, on the Comcast platform? And then we got really into like, okay, so how do you sort of monetize things across, you know, cable platforms and so forth? And we were working with satellite, we were working with cable platforms, we were looking with variances of this platform and this set-top box.
But I think you also did user interfaces, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah.
You know, how are we going to navigate a menu system on a set-top box TV thing, if I remember correctly?
So there was a company called Schematic.
Schematic in California, in LA. That's
so
right.
Aaron went and then moved to LA and started working with Dale Heristag. Dale ran, at that point, H Design, I think was the name of his firm, and then he became Schematic. So after I left you guys, I went and worked with Danny Anker, who was a documentary filmmaker who'd just been nominated for one of his documentaries, and I started working with him. The crash happened. Fortunately, I had a visa that let me stick around in the US, and I was able to kind of go. And then I went to work for Intel, and I was doing some of their desktop apps and some of their TV stuff for Intel.
I remember meeting you at Intel. That's right.
Then I went to Yahoo, and I took the work we were doing with Intel to Yahoo, and we set up what was called the living room team at Yahoo.
I remember that as well. That's right. Yeah.
All the time, when I was at Yahoo, I got in contact with Dale Heristag, who is now running Schematic.
Yeah.
And they've just been acquired by the Content Project and are now called Schematic. And he took me on to help run Schematic's New York office.
That's how Richard Titus.
Richard Titus and Dale were partners at that point. And they were acquired by Content Project, which then became Schematic.
Right.
And I helped Dale set up the New York office of Schematic before they sold to WPP.
Wow.
So did you work with Richard then when he went over to the BBC when he was doing iPlayer?
I didn't. And when he went over, he reached out and said, I'm now, you know, Uber leader of the BBC practice. But by then I had kids in New York, in Brooklyn, and, you know, I was very much like sort of located.
Yeah.
So, you know, I have to say I learned a huge amount from Dale at Schematic.
Dale was amazing. Such a visionary, just quiet and humble and, you know, always wore black. He was like Aaron, always wore black.
But, you know, like to be the apprentice of someone who is really good, not just good, but really good, you come to the table, again, like going back to my beginnings, I come to the table not by speaking, but by maybe showing a few designs, showing a few motion studies in After Effects. Some of the motion studies work that Schematic was doing for like Vongo and other like sort of video on demand work was some of the best work, and we were very much inspired by like the stuff that was happening on Blu-ray. Like some of the motion sequences that were happening in Blu-ray, we were trying to build into playout systems for broadcast TV. So all of the great transitions you see in Netflix today, all of the seamlessness that was being put together, a lot of the breaks were still visible to the audience,
right?
When you were experiencing these systems. They were still in their infancy,
right?
Largely today, the technology caught up that all of that is masked behind the scenes. Everything is getting pre-cached, and there are playout renders already in place for all the way that these transitions worked. We'd already designed them. We were really trying to implement the technology to make it happen.
But I'll go back to the roller coaster for a moment. I remember we used that in so many pitches afterwards to showcase our innovation capabilities, our creative user design and user interface capabilities. And I remember, who was it? It was some conservative company we pitched around some web. Oh, Maritz Travel. And I remember the pitch. Aaron opens up with that.
Yeah.
And they just went, whoa. They said, yeah, we do that stuff, but we're also going to talk to you about your website now.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm curious, Dan, because I feel like you were exploring stuff that some of those ideas have largely gotten forgotten. Like, I feel like a lot of the interactive TV stuff now is very transactional. It's like, click here to watch a movie, click here to do this. Right. I would love to hear your insights about what you feel was lost in terms of what was possible from a content perspective and sort of how it's evolved. And like,
before you go there, though, I have to tell you that you trained me so well. Even today, when I do the Amazon Prime user interface of searching for something, I'm like, you know what? If Dan Sellers had been involved with this, it would be easy. So you've indoctrinated us.
So again, like the theme that I will always kind of impart to others is you pick up stuff as you go along. And one of the things that I learned when I went to Intel, and Brian Johnson brought me on at Intel, was that they actually had a UX research team, HCI labs. They could run baselines on what an existing experience looks like from a sort of time on task analysis perspective. So they're doing qualitative assessments as well as quantitative. So they're capturing quantitative data, click-throughs, all that good stuff. And they're doing the qualitative stuff because they're doing sort of ethnographic research. They're going into people's homes. They're watching. So I instantly, because of like Danny Anker and documentary stuff, I love going into people's homes and watching and listening and talking. And maybe you don't even bring a camera. You just bring a notebook and you're watching and observing. Like with the roller coaster, and we went onto theme parks and watched them. And so as I'm training teams, I'm helping them to sort of get an appreciation for these are some of the more thoroughbred, what felt like to me back then as like Brave New World is now just commonplace of just doing really good, solid design work and systematic understanding, so that as we're building our business case for the way we go do things, this is part and parcel of the culture. So I have a usability lab in my basement here. Why? Because it's quick and easy and I can do quick things very easily.
Wow.
But I brought two great researchers to EPAM from the UK over to New York because I want some of like the best researchers I can find on the planet to be part of the team. And they're now working on life sciences or financial stuff or education stuff because it's so crucial to the way in which we build defendable sort of business conversations with our stakeholders around this is why this is solid, good work, and this is what we're learning from it, and this is what we're extracting from the data. Because if you think about the Netflix experience, it's building the algorithm of your preferences.
Right.
It's serving them up.
Yeah. Interesting.
And if you go into some of the newer players in the market, HBO Max and some of the others, Peacock, they don't have an algorithm.
They don't. That's right.
Based on preferences and your usage.
That's right.
They're not changing out artwork based on who you are. If you dig into what's going on behind the scenes with
it's those subtleties. It's those little subtleties, right?
Add up. They give me a few little basis points here, a few little additional points here, 0.6 improvement. If I'm sweating all of those improvements, when I do the net sum total of all of those improvements over and over and over again. And I'm doing it with an aggregate that is now like 300 million active users globally.
Right.
I'm sure that number's way off. I'm sure it's closer to 50.
Bigger.
But
It's
when
probably
you look
bigger,
at the aggregate of all of that real-time data and all of that crunching, you now have to be a data scientist to be really good as a UXer inside of that. And now we're being really multidisciplinary. So if we think of, again, I go back to my career and I think of, okay, well, what would Ridley Scott have done on Blade Runner to make Blade Runner what it is? He brought multidisciplinary people to make that vision come alive. If you're running UX teams now, you're part of a multidisciplinary team, and you better have a number of key roles with multidisciplinary people who are also as curious about learning and adjusting. And nobody is the star. You're actually working really tight kind of with each other in order to
but don't you think this is the debate I used to have when I was at Ogilvy with people, was we used to do that in 1996, 97, 98, 99. Our UX people, our creative, our art directors, our tech guys were all collaborating on this project. It was never, the creative made the final decision. It was we as a team created something for the customer, right?
Yeah.
But I would suspect now, having the resources, the vast resources of EPAM behind you, with the technology capabilities and the data science capabilities they have, you must be doing some incredible work over there, right?
It is incredible work, and it is really at the coalface of breaking down, product development cycles. Yeah, making sure that you've got a really in the last few years, in the last 5 years, I've really kind of fostered a service design, almost like a full stack service design mentality and appreciation. So there's crossovers into business design, but really service design says it looks at the entirety of everything, and it looks at all of the touch points that customers are making, users are making, but it also has a very healthy appreciation for the systems underneath the big iceberg. So we see this little 5% at the top, and there's a big system of complexity underneath it. And if you're an EPAM with core engineers who thrive on understanding the data model and the extraction of those core systems and the decoupling of those systems and the putting back together again, and they do it with a thoroughbred kind of mindset around managing that as a massive amount of work, whether you're moving to like headless or cloud native or whatever it is, you're sort of doing that, and EPAM's doing that with 25 years of engineering experience.
Exactly.
But if you're a UXer, you've really got to be able to speak 2 or 3 languages in order to be, I think, seen as being kind of a sort of thoroughbred of how we tackle projects.
Right.
So I'm working with the Enterprise Solutions Lab, which sort of sits inside of EPAM as a kind of group that is multidisciplinary, taking on some of the hardest complex aspects of work, whether it's industrials or life sciences or financials. And
see, Kyle, you were way ahead of your time with the Innovation Lab.
That's it.
I mean,
look at that.
I actually think we had an innovation lab called something. I can't remember what it was.
We did. What was it called
Paul Galley
again?
was leading it for a while for IBM.
Yeah,
right?
Well, I think it was called the Innovation Lab.
Okay, yeah. I think that's where I got partnered up with Paul Galley, who has remained a lifelong friend all the way through.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes, of course.
That's great.
Amazing. That's amazing. What about Tim? Have you spoken to Tim at all?
Tim, every time he comes to New York, or as often as he can when he can on those quick trips. So he's largely connected to the Danish Design Institute. He is a kind of leading thought advocate around the promotion of Danish design.
Huh. Interesting.
He's fluent in Danish, and has, I think, been a great ambassador for Danish design actually in New York. So he partners with the Danish embassy, who run a program out of New York.
Wow. Amazing. Cool.
What do you remember most from those early, either the 99 stuff, like, what do you remember most, or what is still with you today that is, like, is there a through line from where you were back then to where you are now? And if so, what is it?
I mean, so here's what I suffer from is I forget things so quickly that I feel like I haven't learned them until I rediscover that I know something. And one of the things that's happened in COVID was, I'm a big marker, pen, and whiteboard guy, right? So because I don't rely on me speaking, I have to draw it for you. Yeah. And I started doing these 5x7 cards.
No, look at that.
I was just during COVID, I was like, why am I just not using a sketchbook and putting everything onto cards?
Yeah.
So then what I started doing is I started doing card sorting, because I've got I don't know, there's probably like 50 ideas in here, but they're all disconnected.
Yeah.
So then this is brilliant. Like, this is basic as it comes. So then what I do is
my gosh, sort, look at that.
And then I photograph and then I print. So now I've got
there's your storyboard
ideas.
Here's my storyboard. Exactly, Ritesh.
Yeah.
Storyboard. If I've got a storyboard, now I can walk into a meeting and present something to you. So that's what's happened during COVID. And that's, I guess, to go back to your question, what is the through line? The through line is I forget things until I rediscover them again.
That's
so
great.
How do I rediscover things that were always true that I keep forgetting and then I rediscover them is ritual. Ritual is really important for me in order to sort of prepare myself for new projects.
Interesting.
But learning new stuff is a big part of, so throwing out what I,
always staying curious, always being
stuff
curious.
in.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I still fail spectacularly.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is I had a financial services client, and I had to go over to the UK in January and February, be away from my family, be away from all of my rituals. I was dealing with family issues that were going on in the UK, and I was still trying to run point on a financial services firm, leading some research. And I should have just said, I can't do it.
Yeah.
I literally could not be out of my ritual, away from my family, dealing with the family crisis during COVID. COVID was at its high point, and I still can't. And knowing what I know about New York financial services firms and how on point you have to be. And I did spend time, I've done projects at Goldman Sachs. I've been on site at Goldman Sachs and run, projects. And it wasn't for Goldman Sachs. I just want to be clear. I failed. I got taken off the project, and I got taken off the project. I was largely taken off spectacularly because I had failed to deliver what was needed in this extreme circumstance. And so what I've realized is, man, I'm not 25 pulling 90-hour weeks and dealing with the family stuff. I'm in my 40s. I'm struggling to wake up. Yeah. So humility and the ability to be kind of realistic with yourself.
There you go.
And I heard this phrase, don't confuse enthusiasm for capability.
Yeah.
When I speak at this, I'm all enthusiastic, I was dial it down. Here's what's going to happen. Here's what we need to do first, second, and third. We have a choice about whether we do third or second. But there are some things that you're going to have to just do.
Exactly.
Wow.
Somebody said, you quit.
So I hope in some small way that gives you a sense that this is not, ever easy. And I do think that, there are 5 or 6 film directors that I just constantly follow their work, their careers. I was in the behind the scenes of Michael Mann's Heat that, you can pick up on Apple for $4.99, and you get all of the behind the scenes. And I actually think it's one of Michael Mann's, one of his best films ever. And I'm plugging Michael Mann and Heat, not because of the story, which is a phenomenal story and it's a gruesome story, but the behind the scenes of how Michael went and built that script, that story with the actors and the performances. And I really do love the behind the scenes of things. I think why this show is so great is you're getting into what actually happened? What was behind that? What was the motivations of that? And I think that my film training and the difficulty of pulling off difficult projects and doing it multidisciplinary is good training. Getting out of your silo, asking how other people see a problem. When you disagree, don't say you disagree. Say, I see it differently.
There you go.
And then maybe explain why you see it differently.
Yeah.
And actually, the second you do that, your humility has risen and the confrontation has dropped.
Yeah.
And
the egos get out the way as well very quickly after that, right?
Because sometimes I get so wildly passionate about that's not what we should do.
Just like Kyle does.
Yeah. and we would never fight about it, but literally, I'm like, can I throw something at somebody?
Carl does that all the time.
Right. And so mindfulness and humility, I think, are really important. And I do think that I'm stupid at times about things. Certain things I'm very particular about the ritual of how things should be.
Yeah.
But largely, I have tried to empower teams to make their own mistakes, learn, clear the way for them. Because remember, as you become more senior, you kind of put into those leadership roles, and you've got to grow people. All of those teams under you have to grow. And there's a point at which they will leave your organization and go on to the next great organization.
Yeah, just like you did.
Grow.
Exactly.
And I've really enjoyed that aspect of bringing the next, all those teams under you are doing amazing work. And I've just risen the bar of like what's possible for them, and I've helped them. And that's been really satisfying.
Dan, this was amazing. We could go on for another 2 hours, I think. We say that at every show. Every show we end with like, we could go for 2 more hours.
But you should always feel like there's more here, because that's a great way to finish. It's just a great way to finish. And the edited highlights and so forth will come out. But
I love it.
It
was so good. So good to catch up with you. I'm so happy to see you as well. And you're still in Brooklyn? You're still in Brooklyn?
I'm mostly in Brooklyn. This is Dollstown, where we've sort of escaped a little bit during COVID, but largely, I think I'm on my 20th year in the US. And yes.
Amazing.
But, I would love to see you gents face to face.
Yes. And, we have to organize another bloody reunion after the COVID debacle. So.
Well, this was great, Dan. Hang on one sec. Let me wind down the broadcast.